Let's learn how to solve rational inequalities. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say we have 1 over x minus 3 is less than or equal to 5 over x minus 3. So the first step in solving rational inequalities, step 1, is to make one side 0. Make one side 0. Okay? So we have to make one side 0. So we can either subtract from this side or we can subtract from the other side. So I'm going to actually subtract from here. So I'm going to subtract minus 5 over x minus 3 from both sides. So on this side I'll be left with 0. And on this side I'll be left with negative 4 over x minus 3. Okay? So step 2 is to get critical values. Okay? There's just 3 steps. Okay, this is step number 2. So what is a critical value? A critical value is anything that makes the numerator 0 or the denominator 0. For example, if we had x here, right? So if we had x, a 0 would be a critical value because when x is 0, then the numerator is 0. But in this case, there is no x in the numerator. So what are our critical values? Our critical value is actually only going to be 3. This is our critical value. Because when we plug in 3 for x, we see that the denominator is 0. Okay? So that's step 3. We got our critical values. Now, and that's step 2, critical values. Now, the final step is just to do something called sign analysis. Okay? And what this is, it's just a really fancy word that means that we're going to do a special kind of we're going to do a special kind of analysis on this inequality. So what we're going to do, we're going to use this critical value and we're going to make like a number line. Okay? And on the number line, we're going to put our critical values, right? And then we're going to decide, am I going to put an open circle or a closed circle here? And we see that if we have the critical value of 3, then the denominator is 0. That means that it cannot be. When we say open circle, it means it cannot be the value of 3. So now in sign analysis, what we're going to do is we're going to plug a value less than 3. So 0 is a very convenient value. So what happens when we plug in 0 for x? We will get negative 4 over negative 3. But when we do sign analysis, we're actually not just going to plug it in. We don't really care about what the value is. We just care about if it's negative or positive. So what I like to do is I like to write negative, because the top will always be negative, over, well, 0 minus 3 is negative, right? And then we will say that negative divided by negative is always positive. So if our value is less than 3, so we can choose any value. We can put 0, we can put negative 1, we can put 2.9, whatever we put, right, into our value for x. We're going to see what is the numerator, is it negative or positive, and the denominator, is it negative or positive. And in this case, when we plugged in 0, then the numerator is negative, and the denominator is also negative. So our total fraction is going to be positive. So if we have a positive value for this rational inequality, then we see that we don't want a positive value because it's less than 0. When something is less than 0, it's negative. So we're actually going to put a big X for all of these values. So none of these values will work. We just have to test one case. Okay? And now we're going to try something above 3, okay? So we're always going to choose values that are in between our critical values. For example, if I had a critical value of 0, I would test something between 0 and 3. And if I had a critical value of maybe negative 2.5, I would test values between negative 2.5 and 0. And then I would determine if they satisfy the inequality, okay? for example, we got that it's positive, but positive doesn't satisfy. And that's why this, anything less than 3 is going to be considered, so anything less than 3 is going to be considered invalid. Now let's try something greater than 3. For example, 5. So 5, the top will always be positive, and 5 on the bottom denominator, it's going to be positive, because 5 minus 3 is 2, and 2 is positive. So when we have negative over positive, then we have a negative. And negative is what we want, because it's less than 0. So we're actually going to put a check mark here. So everything above 3 will work. And so our final answer, if we want to put in interval notation, it will just look like close parentheses, or parentheses because of an open circle, and then comma, infinity, because it goes all the way to infinity. So this is our final answer for the rational